Okay, self-talk. You want to understand it.
Mm.
And honestly, who doesn't? I mean, we all have that little voice in our heads.
Right.
Sometimes it's our best friend. Sometimes it feels like our worst enemy. Today, we are going deep into how this internal chatter shapes us, not just our mindset, but our emotions and even our actions too. You know, the sources you gave me, they mentioned this thing called the layers of identity, which sounds super interesting, maybe for another time. But for today, we're laser focused on how you, the listener, can harness the power of self-talk to your advantage.
Yeah. And it really is powerful. You know what people often miss? It's not just about like thinking positive thoughts. It's about really understanding the mechanics of how those thoughts, both conscious and subconscious, can impact our resilience, our decision making, and even how we respond to challenges.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. So we're talking about more than just those little pep talks we give ourselves in the mirror, this conscious and subconscious thing. The source defines self-talk as this ongoing internal dialogue. But it's not always something we're actively aware of, is it?
Exactly. Think of it like a constant stream of commentary running in the background of our minds. Sometimes it's loud and clear. Other times, it's just these subtle whispers that we might not even realize are influencing us.
Whoa. Okay, that's a little unnerving when you think about it, but also kind of amazing.
Yeah.
So what's the breakdown here? The source mentions two main types of self-talk, negative and positive. I'm guessing it's not as simple as just good versus bad, though.
Right. Yeah, you're right. There's more nuance to it. Negative self-talk, it's often that inner critic we all have, you know? It's the voice of doubt, fear, all those I'm not good enough thoughts. It can really undermine our confidence and keep us playing small. Positive self-talk. Now, that's like having a supportive friend in your corner, cheering you on. It's that voice that says, you've got this, or I'm capable of handling whatever comes my way.
I can definitely relate to both sides of that coin. The source actually gives a great example of that, a potential promotion. Okay, so imagine your inner voice saying, I'll never be good enough for this, versus, I have the skills to grow into this role. Which voice sounds more familiar? Be honest with yourself.
That's a powerful question to consider because it highlights how our self-talk directly shapes how we view our abilities.
Yeah.
You know, it also brings us to the importance of recognizing patterns in our negative self-talk.
Okay, let's dive into that. So the source outlines a few common patterns that seem to trip a lot of us up. First up is all or nothing thinking. It's like seeing the world in black and white.
Right.
You're either a smashing success or a total failure. No in between.
Right. There's no room for shades of gray with that kind of thinking. And this can be especially damaging because it sets us up for feeling like we're constantly falling short. You know, it's an unrealistic standard to hold ourselves to.
It's like setting ourselves up for disappointment right out of the gate. Okay, then there's catastrophizing, which I'm definitely guilty of sometimes. This is where we just jump to the worst case scenario in almost every situation.
Exactly. It's like our minds are playing out these disaster movie scenarios. If I don't ace this presentation, I'll lose my job. If I don't get a date, I'll be alone forever. It's easy to see how this kind of thinking can lead to anxiety and keep us from taking risks.
Oh, it's exhausting, frankly. And then there's personalizing, which is a real joy. This is when we take everything personally, right? It's like we're wearing a giant kick me sign on our backs.
Yeah, it's that tendency to assume blame for things that are often outside of our control. It can make us hypersensitive to criticism and constantly second guess ourselves.
Okay, so we've got all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, and personalizing. What's the final pattern the source highlights?
This one is particularly pervasive, especially in today's world. It's imposter syndrome, that sneaky feeling that we're not as competent as others perceive us to be, even when we have evidence to the contrary.
Oh, imposter syndrome. Everyone's favorite frenemy.
Yeah.
It's like that nagging voice that whispers, you're a fraud, they're going to find you out, even when you're achieving great things.
What's fascinating is that research shows this is incredibly common, even in highly successful people. It isn't just about lacking confidence. It's a specific pattern of thinking that can hold us back from reaching our full potential.
So we've identified some of the bad guys, so to speak. But where do we go from here? The source also offers some real-life examples of people overcoming these negative patterns.
Right.
There's one about someone reframing a perceived failure as a learning opportunity. That really stood out to me.
That's a key takeaway here. It's so easy to get stuck in those negative thought loops. But these examples show us that they are not permanent. It's possible to learn to recognize these patterns and choose to respond differently.
That's encouraging to hear. So it's not about raising negative thoughts altogether, but more about developing the skills to manage them more effectively.
Right. So let's get to the strategies. What does the source suggest for reframing those negative thought patterns? The source outlines 4 key strategies for reframing negative self-talk. The first step is simply to pause and acknowledge the negative thought when it arises. Don't try to push it away or ignore it. Just notice it without judgment.
So it's about developing awareness of that inner critic without getting swept up in the drama, right? What's the next step?
The second step is where we start to flex our critical thinking muscles. It's about challenging the validity of that thought. Ask yourself, is this thought really true? Is there any evidence to support it? What's a more balanced perspective?
It's like we're putting those negative thoughts on trial, cross-examining them to see if their case actually holds up. I love that analogy.
Exactly. And often when we really scrutinize those negative thoughts, they crumble under the weight of logic and evidence. Then we can move on to step 3, which is replacing that negativity with a more positive and constructive affirmation. For example, instead of dwelling on, I'm a failure, we might say, I'm learning and improving every day.
It's like swapping out a weed in our mental garden with a vibrant, healthy flower. Speaking of which, the source actually provides a list of affirmations to get us started, which is super helpful. You can find that on our website, by the way. What about the 4th strategy?
The 4th strategy is all about harnessing the power of our imagination. It involves visualization, picturing yourself succeeding or overcoming challenges. This can be a powerful tool for reinforcing positive beliefs and building a sense of confidence.
It's like giving our brains a mental movie of us rocking it. And the source mentions a super helpful exercise to put all of this into practice, a thought journal. I'm a big believer in journaling, so I'm curious to hear more about how this works specifically for reframing negative self-talk.
A thought journal, when used intentionally, can be a game changer. It allows us to track those negative self-talk patterns, identify what triggers them, and then practice reframing those thoughts in real time. It's like having a personal trainer for your mind.
Okay, I'm definitely grabbing a pen and paper for this one. This is something you can literally start doing as you're listening to this deep dive. What does the source suggest in terms of format or structure for this journal?
They recommend a simple yet effective format that helps us break down those negative thought patterns. First, you describe the situation that triggered the negative self-talk. What happened? What were the specific circumstances? We're setting the stage, so to speak.
I got it. We're laying out the scene for the inner drama that's about to unfold. Then what?
Next, you write down the actual negative thought that popped into your head. What did that inner critic say? Be as specific and honest as possible. No sugarcoating those nasty thoughts.
Okay, no holding back. We're getting real with ourselves here.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
Now it's time to put those negative thoughts on trial. You challenge the thought by asking yourself those critical questions. Is this thought really true? Is there evidence to support it? What's a more balanced or realistic perspective?
I love that we're really digging into the evidence here, not just taking those negative thoughts at face value. And then what's the final step in this thought journaling process?
The final step is where the real transformation happens. It's where you reframe the thought. You come up with a more positive and constructive statement that reflects a healthier perspective. It's like replacing that weed with a beautiful flower, but on a cognitive level.
This is such a powerful exercise because the more we do it, the easier it becomes to recognize and reframe those negative thoughts automatically, even without the journal. It's like building a mental muscle, right?
Exactly. But journaling isn't the only tool in our self-talk toolkit. Remember those affirmations we talked about earlier? Those can be incredibly powerful, especially when used consistently.
Right. Affirmations, those positive statements we repeat to ourselves to reinforce a belief or desired outcome, like I am strong and capable, or I am worthy of love and success. But are we literally just trying to brainwash ourselves here?
It's not about brainwashing, but it does tap into the incredible power of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt over time. When we consistently repeat positive affirmations that resonate with us, we're essentially creating new neural pathways that support those beliefs. It's like building a mental pathway towards a more positive self-image.
So it's not just wishful thinking. There's actual science backing this up. That's fascinating. But I imagine the affirmations have to be more than just generic phrases we find online, right?
You're absolutely right. For affirmations to be truly effective, they need to be grounded in truth and feel authentic to you. So instead of blindly adopting someone else's affirmations, take some time to reflect on your values, your strengths, and the qualities you want to cultivate. Then, craft affirmations that align with your core beliefs and feel personally empowering.
It's about creating a personal mantra that resonates deeply with you. And I imagine that using visualization can also enhance the power of affirmations, right? Like picturing yourself achieving a goal while repeating those positive statements.
Absolutely. When we combine positive affirmations with vivid imagery, we create a powerful mental cocktail that can supercharge our self-belief and motivation. It's like giving our brains a double dose of positivity.
So we're talking about creating a full sensory experience in our minds, seeing, feeling, hearing ourselves, achieving our goals while reinforcing those positive beliefs with affirmations. That's powerful stuff. But what about the role of our external environment and the people we surround ourselves with? Can that impact our self-talk as well?
Absolutely. The people we spend time with can have a profound impact on our self-perception and our inner dialogue. If we're constantly surrounded by negativity, criticism, or people who doubt us, it's going to be much harder to cultivate a positive inner voice.
So it's about choosing our tribe wisely, surrounding ourselves with people who lift us up, support us, and inspire us to be our best selves. But what about those times when we're really struggling with negative self-talk despite our best efforts? What does the source suggest for those situations?
It's important to remember that we don't have to go it alone. Sometimes we need a little extra support to overcome those deeply ingrained negative beliefs. And that's where seeking professional help can be incredibly valuable. Therapists and coaches can provide expert guidance and tools to help us identify and reframe those harmful thought patterns.
It's like having a personal trainer for our minds, but with professional credentials. They can help us see those blind spots and develop strategies that might not be obvious to us. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the different types of self-talk, those pesky negative patterns that can trip us up, and a bunch of strategies for reframing those thoughts and cultivating a more positive inner dialogue. But before we wrap up, I have to ask about the teaser at the end of the source material. It mentions embracing vulnerability, which sounds intriguing. What can you tell us about that?
What's fascinating about embracing vulnerability is that it challenges the notion that positive self-talk is about always being perfect, confident, and having it all together. It's a different perspective that I think a lot of people might find refreshing, especially if they've struggled with the think positive approach in the past.
So it's not about pretending that we never make mistakes or feel insecure.
Exactly. Embracing vulnerability is about acknowledging our imperfections, our flaws, and learning to be kind to ourselves even when we mess up. It's about recognizing that we're all human, we all have areas where we struggle, and that's perfectly okay.
It's about letting go of that pressure to be perfect and embracing the full spectrum of human experience, including those messy, vulnerable parts. I'm already hooked. But for now, let's focus on putting these self-talk strategies into practice. Remember that thought journal exercise we talked about? What if we all committed to trying it for just 1 week? Imagine the positive shifts we could create in our lives in such a short amount of time.
I love that challenge. And if you're feeling brave, share your reframe thoughts with us on social media. We'd love to hear about your breakthroughs and support each other on this journey.
We're all in this together, right? It's so easy to get caught up in the comparison game and feel like we're the only ones struggling with these negative thought patterns. But the truth is, everyone has an inner critic. To some degree, it's part of the human experience.
Exactly. And what's so empowering about this whole concept of self-talk is that it's a tool we can all use to create real, lasting change in our lives. It's not about becoming some unrealistically positive, happy-go-lucky version of ourselves. It's about learning to navigate those inevitable ups and downs with more self-awareness and compassion.
It's like we're developing a more supportive relationship with ourselves. But I imagine it's not always easy to shift those ingrained patterns of negative thinking. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out on this journey of reframing their self-talk?
First and foremost, be patient with yourself. It takes time and practice to unlearn those old habits of negative self-talk and build new, more positive ones. It's like learning a new language or developing any new skill. It's a process that unfolds over time, not an overnight transformation.
We're not going to become fluent in the language of positive self-talk overnight.
Exactly. Start small. Instead of trying to overhaul your entire inner dialogue all at once, choose 1 or 2 specific negative thoughts that you want to work on and focus on reframing those consistently.
So maybe instead of trying to tackle all of our self-criticism at once, we pick an area where we tend to be most harsh on ourselves, like our work performance or our body image, and start there.
That's a great strategy. And remember, it's not about suppressing negative thoughts altogether. They're a natural part of the human experience. It's about learning to manage them more effectively so they don't derail us.
So when those negative thoughts inevitably pop up, we acknowledge them, challenge their validity,
Mm.
and then choose to respond
Mm-hmm.
in a more positive and constructive way.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to experiment with different techniques. What works for one person may not work for another. Try journaling, affirmations, visualization, or even talking to a trusted friend or therapist about what you're experiencing.
It's about finding the tools and strategies that resonate with you
Mm-hmm.
and fit into your life in a sustainable way. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to this, and I think it's important to remember that cultivating a more positive inner dialogue
Mm.
is an ongoing process. There will be days when we rock it and days when we struggle, and that's okay.
Absolutely. The key is to keep practicing, keep learning, and
Right.
keep growing. The more we invest in our self-talk, the more empowered and resilient we become in all areas of our lives.
Now, on that note, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the power of self-talk. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and the practical tools to transform your inner dialogue and create a more positive and fulfilling life. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. We all have that inner critic to contend with.
The conversations you have with yourself matter. Choose to speak to yourself with kindness, compassion, and encouragement. You deserve it. And remember, even small shifts in your self-talk can create ripple effects that positively impact your well-being and your overall success.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to check out our website for those bonus resources we mentioned, including that thought journal template and a list of affirmations to get you started. And be sure to tune in next week, where we'll be taking a deep dive into embracing vulnerability. It's going to be a fascinating exploration of what it means to show up authentically in the world, imperfections and all its